In the fog-choked shadows of Willow Manor, journalist Marianne Sheridan, Detective Hercule Poirot, and the astute Miss Marple are summoned to face an ancient entity that feeds on fear. A blood-stained locket marks Marianne as the key, or the betrayer, in a ritual to bind a devourer that whispers their names. As mirrors show horrors and ravens circle, can they unite to seal the evil, or will the raven's hour claim them all? Dive into a chilling mystery where trust is the only weapon against an endless hunger. Chapter 1. The Unexpected Summons. The fog clung to the earth like a shroud, muffling the world in a damp, suffocating silence. Marianne Sheridan stood at the edge of the platform, her breath visible in the chill November air, as the distant rumble of a train grew louder. The station at Little Hemsley was little more than a wooden shelter, its paint peeling like the skin of some long-forgotten beast. A single gas lamp flickered above, casting a sickly yellow glow that did little to pierce the mist. Marianne pulled, her coat tighter, her gloved fingers trembling, not from the cold but from the letter crumpled in her pocket. The summons had arrived 3 days ago, slipped under her door in the dead of night. No postmark, no return address, just her name scrawled in ink so black it seemed to drink the light. Marianne Sheridan. The words within were formal, almost archaic, requesting her presence at Willow Manor, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Little Hemsley. The sender, one Lord Reginald Ashford, claimed urgency but offered no details, only a promise of matters most grave and a cryptic mention of those who see beyond the veil. Marianne, a journalist with a knack for uncovering truths, others preferred buried, had no connection to Ashford or his manor. Yet the letter's tone, its insistence, had wormed its way into her thoughts, whispering of secrets too dark to ignore. The train screeched to a halt, its iron wheels grinding against the tracks like a scream cut short. Marianne boarded, her suitcase heavy in her hand, and found a compartment empty save for a man in a pristine suit, his mustache impeccably waxed, his eyes sharp as a predator's. He glanced up from his newspaper, and Marianne felt a jolt as if he'd seen straight through her. "Mademoiselle Sheridan, I presume?" His voice was accented, precise, each syllable polished to a gleam. "I am Hercule Poirot. It seems we are bound for the same destination." Marianne froze, her hand tightening on the suitcase handle. "How do you know my name?" Poirot's lips twitched into a smile that was both charming and unnerving. "The letter, mademoiselle. It bears the same crest as the one I received. Willow Manor, oui? A most curious invitation." Before Marianne could respond, the compartment door slid open again, revealing an elderly woman in a tweed skirt and cardigan, her eyes bright behind wire-rimmed glasses. She carried a knitting bag, the needles clicking softly as she settled into a seat opposite Poirot. "Good evening," she said, her voice warm but laced with a quiet authority. "I'm Jane Marple. I take it you've both been summoned as well?" Marianne's unease deepened. 3 strangers, each called to a remote manor by an unknown host. She pulled the letter from her pocket, smoothing it out. The crest at the top, a raven clutching a broken key, seemed to pulse under her gaze. "What does Lord Ashford want with us?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Poirot folded his newspaper with deliberate care. "That, mademoiselle, is the question. I am a detective of some renown, and Mademoiselle Marple, I believe, has a reputation for solving mysteries in her own unique way. But you, Mademoiselle Sheridan, what is your role in this affair?" Marianne hesitated. "I'm a journalist. I write about things people don't want exposed. Scandals, corruption, the truth." Miss Marple's needles paused, and her eyes flicked to Marianne. "The truth can be a dangerous thing, my dear. Especially in a place like Willow Manor. Gaudy." Train lurched forward, plunging into the fog, and the compartment fell silent. Outside, the world was a blur of gray, the occasional skeletal tree clawing at the mist. Marianne's thoughts churned. She'd heard whispers of Willow Manor before, old stories from her childhood in a nearby village, a place where the walls wept blood, where shadows moved without light to cast them. Ghost stories, she'd thought then. But the letter in her hand felt like a tether, pulling her toward something far worse than childhood tales. The journey stretched on, the train's rhythm a relentless heartbeat. Poirot spoke little, his fingers steepled as he stared into the fog while Miss Marple knitted with an almost hypnotic calm. Marianne tried to read, but the words blurred. Her mind snagged on the letter's final line. Beware the hour when the raven cries. What did it mean? And why did her skin crawl every time she thought of it? Hours later, the train shuddered to a stop at a desolate platform marked only by a rusted sign. Willow Halt. The fog was thicker here, a living thing that pressed against Marianne's face, cold and clammy. A carriage waited, its driver a hunched figure in a black cloak, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. He said nothing as they climbed aboard, only flicked the reins, urging the horses into the mist. The road to Willow Manor wound through a forest of twisted oaks, their branches like fingers reaching for the sky. The carriage creaked, the silence between the passengers heavy. Marianne glanced at Poirot, who was studying the driver's back with narrowed eyes, and at Miss Marple, whose knitting had stopped, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Does anyone else feel watched?" Marianne whispered, her voice barely audible over the clop of hooves. Miss Marple's lips thinned. "My dear, in places like this, one is never truly alone." Poirot nodded, his gaze still fixed on the driver. "The little gray cells, they are uneasy. This manor, it has a reputation, no? Stories of vanishings, of screams in the night." Marianne's stomach twisted. "You've heard them too?" "Oui. And yet, Hercule Poirot does not believe in ghosts. But in evil? That is another matter." The carriage slowed, and Willow Manor loomed into view. It was a monstrous thing, all jagged spires and blackened stone, its windows like empty eyes staring into the fog. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of decay, and Marianne's heart pounded as the driver halted the carriage before the manor's iron gates. They swung open with a groan as if welcoming prey. The driver spoke for the first time, his voice a rasp that seemed to come from somewhere deep and hollow. "Enter and be known." Marianne's legs felt leaden as she stepped onto the gravel. "Drive." The manor's doors, carved with ravens and thorns, stood ajar, and a faint light flickered within. Poirot adjusted his coat, his expression unreadable, while Miss Marple clutched her knitting bag like a talisman. Inside, the air was colder still, the grand hall lit by chandeliers that swayed gently, though no breeze stirred. Portraits lined the walls, their subjects' eyes following the trio with an intensity that made Marianne's skin prickle. At the far end of the hall stood a man in a velvet coat, his face pale and angular, his eyes too bright, like fevered stars. "Welcome," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "I am Lord Reginald Ashford. You've answered my summons, and for that I am grateful, but I fear you may regret it." Marianne's mouth went dry. "Why are we here?" Ashford's smile was a blade. "Because you see what others cannot. And tonight you will need that gift. For something ancient stirs in this house, something that hungers." A scream tore through the manor, high and piercing, cutting off Ashford's words. It came from above, echoing down the spiral staircase, and Marianne's blood turned to ice. Poirot's hand went to his cane, his knuckles white, while Miss Marple's eyes darted to the shadows pooling in the corners. "What was that?" Marianne whispered, her voice trembling. Ashford's smile didn't waver. "That, Miss Sheridan, is why you're here." Chapter 2. A gathering at Willow Manor. The scream still echoed in Marianne Sheridan's ears, a jagged sound that clawed at her nerves. The grand hall of Willow Manor seemed to swallow the noise, its high ceilings and shadowed corners drinking in the terror like a parched beast. The chandeliers above flickered, their flames casting writhing shapes on the walls, and Marianne's pulse hammered as she stood frozen, her eyes locked on Lord Reginald Ashford. His smile, sharp and unyielding, seemed to mock the fear that gripped her. "What was that scream?" she demanded again, her voice sharper now, cutting through the heavy silence. Ashford's eyes gleamed, reflecting the chandelier's light like twin mirrors. "Patience, Miss Sheridan. All will be revealed in time. Come, let us proceed to the drawing room. The others are waiting." "Others?" Hercule Poirot's voice was calm, but his fingers tightened on the silver head of his cane. "You did not mention additional guests, Monsieur Ashford. Who else has been summoned to this peculiar gathering?" Ashford tilted his head as if amused by Poirot's scrutiny. "Those who, like you, possess a certain clarity of sight. You'll meet them shortly. But I warn you, trust is a luxury we cannot afford tonight." Miss Jane Marple, who had been silent since the scream, adjusted her shawl and spoke softly, her voice carrying a weight that belied her frail appearance. "In my experience, Lord Ashford, a house that screams in the night is rarely a place for trust. What game are you playing?" "No game, Miss Marple," Ashford replied, his tone smooth but edged with something colder. "A necessity. Now, if you please." He gestured toward a set of double doors at the far end of the hall, their wood carved with the same raven and thorn motif as the manor's entrance. Marianne's legs moved reluctantly, her journalist's instincts warring with the primal urge to flee. The air in the manor was wrong, too thick, too cold, as if it clung to her skin like damp silk. She glanced at Poirot, whose mustache twitched as he scanned the hall, and at Miss Marple, whose knitting needles were still, her eyes darting to the portraits that lined the walls. The painted faces seemed to shift, their expressions twisting into sneers when Marianne wasn't looking directly at them. The drawing room was no less oppressive. Its walls were draped in crimson velvet, the fabric absorbing the light from a roaring fireplace that did little to warm the space. A long mahogany table dominated the room, set with crystal goblets and a decanter of wine that looked black in the firelight. 5 figures sat around the table, their faces half hidden in shadow, and Marianne's breath caught as she realized they were watching her, Poirot and Miss Marple, with an intensity that felt predatory. Ashford stepped forward, his presence commanding the room. "Allow me to introduce our other guests. Dr. Evelyn Crane, a historian of the occult. Mr. Thomas Blackwood, a medium of some repute. Mrs. Clara Hemming, whose family once owned this manor. Captain James Ridley, a man of military instincts. And Miss Lydia Voss, a scholar of ancient languages." Each nodded in turn, though their eyes held no warmth. Dr. Crane, a severe woman with gray-streaked hair, clutched a leather-bound notebook. Blackwood, gaunt and pale, stared at the table as if seeing something beyond it. Mrs. Hemming, draped in mourning black, trembled slightly, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. Captain Ridley, broad-shouldered and scarred, leaned back with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. And Lydia Voss, young and sharp-featured, traced a symbol on the table with her fingertip, her gaze distant. Marianne's skin prickled. "Why are we all here? What do you want from us?" Ashford poured wine into a goblet, the liquid glinting like blood. "You've been chosen because you see what others cannot. This manor, my friends, is not merely a house. It is a prison, a cage for something older than time, something that stirs once more. Tonight we must face it." A low moan echoed through the room. Not human, but guttural, like stone grinding against stone. The fire dimmed, and the shadows in the corners thickened, coalescing into shapes that seemed to writhe. Marianne's heart lurched and she gripped the back of a chair, her knuckles white. Poirot's voice cut through the tension, precise and unshaken. "Monsieur Ashford, you speak in riddles. What is this something you fear? And why does it scream?" Ashford set the goblet down, untouched. "The entity within these walls is no mere ghost. It is a force, bound here centuries ago by those who paid a terrible price. It feeds on fear, on doubt, on the cracks in our souls. And it is waking." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "And the scream we heard?" Ashford hesitated, his composure slipping for the first time. "A warning, or perhaps a lure. The entity knows you're here." The moan came again, louder, closer, vibrating through the floor. Marianne's gaze darted to the windows, but they were black, the fog outside pressing against the glass like a living thing. She felt it again, that sense of being watched, not by the others in the room, but by something unseen, something that knew her name. Chapter 3. The Shadow of Suspicion. The staircase yawned before them, a black maw carved into the heart of Willow Manor. Marianne Sheridan stood at its edge, her breath shallow, the air so cold it burned her lungs. The voice that had called there, names, inhuman, guttural, like a chorus of whispers layered over a scream, still lingered in her ears, though the sound had faded into an oppressive silence. The door to the staircase, which moments ago had burst open of its own accord, now seemed to pulse with a life of its own, the wood groaning as if straining against an unseen weight. Hercule Poirot adjusted his grip on his cane, his sharp eyes, scanning the darkness below. "This is no ordinary staircase, mes amis," he murmured, his voice steady but laced with unease. "The little gray cells, they protest. There is a pattern here, a design, but it is hidden in shadow." Miss Jane Marple stood beside Marianne, her knitting bag clutched tightly, her lips pursed in thought. "I've seen staircases like this in old houses," she said softly, "but none that felt so hungry. We must be cautious, my dear. This place watches us." Marianne's stomach churned. The other guests, Dr. Evelyn Crane, Thomas Blackwood, Clara Hemming, Captain James Ridley, and Lydia Voss, stood in a tense semicircle behind them, their faces pale in the flickering light of the drawing room's dying fire. Lord Ashford, their enigmatic host, lingered at the back, his expression unreadable, though his eyes darted to the staircase with a flicker of fear. "Who called our names?" Marianne asked, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound resolute. That wasn't human. Ashford's smile was gone, replaced by a grim line. "The entity, Miss Sheridan. It knows you now. It knows all of us." Dr. Crane, the occult historian, stepped forward, her notebook open, her pen trembling in her hand. "I've read of such things," she said, her voice clipped. "Ancient forces bound to places like this, manors, castles, sites of great suffering. They mark their prey. That voice, it's claiming us." "Claiming us for what?" Captain Ridley snapped, his military bearing fraying at the edges. His hand rested on the hilt of a knife at his belt, though Marianne doubted it would do much good against whatever lurked below. "For its purpose," Lydia Voss said, her voice barely above a whisper. The young scholar's fingers traced the air, as if writing invisible symbols. "The text I translated, the one that brought me here, spoke of a devourer, a being that feeds on the essence of those who see too much. We were chosen because we perceive what others cannot." Marianne's mind raced, her journalist's instincts clawing for clarity. "Chosen? By whom? Ashford, you summoned us. What aren't you telling us?" Ashford raised a hand, as if to calm a storm. "I brought you here to stop it, not to feed it. But the manor, it has its own will. It tests us, probes our weaknesses. That staircase is a challenge. We must descend, or it will come for us." A low hum vibrated through the floor, like the growl of a beast stirring in its lair. The shadows in the room thickened, pooling in corners where the firelight couldn't reach. Marianne's skin prickled, and she swore she saw movement, a flicker of something tall and thin, its edges blurred, darting just beyond her vision. Poirot's mustache twitched. "Monsieur Ashford, you speak of tests, but you evade the truth. Why this group? Why now? The little gray cells demand answers." Ashford's eyes darkened. "Because the Raven's hour approaches. The entity's bindings weaken every century, and tonight the alignment of stars and shadows will set it free unless we act. You were chosen for your minds, your courage, your ability to see. But beware. Doubt will be your undoing." Miss Marple's voice was soft but firm. "Doubt, Lord Ashford, is often born of secrets, and I suspect this manor holds many." The hum grew louder, and the staircase seemed to breathe, its darkness swelling. Marianne's heart pounded, but she stepped forward, her fear warring with her need to know. "If we're to face this thing, we need to understand it. I'm going down." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Courage, mademoiselle, is admirable, but haste is folly. We must proceed together with order and method." "Agreed," Miss Marple said, her eyes scanning the group. "But we must also watch each other. In a place like this, suspicion is as dangerous as the shadows. The group exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of her words settling over them. Marianne felt it too, the seed of distrust, planted by the manor's oppressive presence. Who among them could be trusted? And what did Ashford know that he wasn't saying? Chapter 4. Clues in the afternoon. The darkness in the subterranean chamber lingered in Marianne Sheridan's mind, even as the group emerged into the relative safety of Willow Manor's upper floors. The stone altar, etched with their names, in a script that seemed to writhe under scrutiny, had shaken her to her core. The entity's whispered promises of betrayal still clung to her, like cobwebs she couldn't brush away. Her hands trembled as she followed Lord Ashford and the others back to the drawing room, the air now heavy with the scent of bergamot and scones, an incongruous afternoon tea laid out as if the manor itself mocked their fear. The crimson-draped drawing room was no less oppressive than before, its fire casting long shadows that danced across the velvet walls. The mahogany table, once set with wine, now held an elaborate tea service, delicate porcelain cups, a steaming teapot, and platters of pastries that glistened unnaturally in the firelight. Marianne's stomach turned at the sight. After the horrors of the cellar, the normalcy of tea felt like a trap. Hercule Poirot surveyed the table with a critical eye, his mustache twitching as he lifted a teacup, inspecting it as if it were evidence. "This is most irregular," he said, his voice precise but tinged with suspicion. "A tea service prepared without servants in a house that breathes malice. What is the purpose, Monsieur Ashford?" Lord Ashford, standing by the fireplace, offered a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "A moment of respite, Monsieur Poirot. Even in the face of darkness, civility must prevail. Please sit." Miss Jane Marple settled into a chair, her knitting bag at her side, her gaze sharp as she scanned the room. "Civility, Lord Ashford, is often a mask. In my village, tea is where secrets are spilled, intentionally or not. I wonder what this tea will reveal." Marianne hesitated, her journalist's instincts screaming that nothing in this manor was as it seemed. The other guests, Dr. Evelyn, Crane, Thomas Blackwood, Clara Hemming, Captain James Ridley, and Lydia Voss, took their seats with varying degrees of reluctance. Crane clutched her notebook, her fingers stained with ink. Blackwood's eyes darted to the shadows, his face ashen. Hemming's hands shook as she reached for a cup, her morning black stark against the porcelain. Ridley's smirk was gone, replaced by a tense vigilance, his knife now openly displayed on the table. Voss, still tracing invisible symbols, muttered, under her breath, her words in a language Marianne couldn't place. The tea was poured, the steam curling upward like spectral fingers. Marianne lifted her cup, the liquid dark and opaque, its surface reflecting her face, or was it someone else's? She blinked, and the reflection was her own again, but her heart raced. "This doesn't feel right," she said, her voice low. "Why tea? Why now?" Ashford's gaze flicked to her, his expression unreadable. "To steady your nerves, Miss Sheridan. You'll need them for what lies ahead." A soft clink broke the silence, Miss Marple's teaspoon striking her saucer. "I notice," she said, her tone deceptively mild, "that the sugar bowl is engraved with a raven, the same raven as the manor's crest, and the tea, it has a peculiar scent. Not bergamot, I think. Something older." Poirot's eyes narrowed as he sniffed his cup. "Oui, Mademoiselle Marple. There is a bitterness here, not of tea leaves. Perhaps an herb? Or something less wholesome?" Marianne set her cup down untouched. The air grew colder, the fire dimming as if choked by an unseen hand. A low hum vibrated through the room, the same guttural sound from the cellar, and the shadows in the corners thickened, forming shapes that seemed to lean closer. Dr. Crane's voice was sharp. "It's the ritual. The tea is part of it. My research, there, are accounts of offerings laced with substances to weaken the mind, to make one receptive to the entity." "Receptive," Ridley growled, shoving his cup away. "You mean poisoned?" "Not poison," Voss whispered, her eyes distant. "A key to unlock the soul," Marianne's skin crawled. She glanced at the pastries, their glossy surfaces now seeming to pulse faintly, like the carvings in the cellar. "We're not drinking this," she said, standing. "Ashford, what are you playing at?" Before Ashford could respond, a scream, high and piercing, tore through the manor, different from the one in the hall but no less chilling. It came from above, followed by a heavy thud that shook the chandelier. Dust rained from the ceiling and the fire flared, casting a momentary blaze of light that revealed something in the corner, a figure, tall and thin, its face a void. Gone, as quickly as it appeared. Poirot was on his feet, his cane tapping the floor. "To the source, mes amis. We cannot ignore this." Miss Marple nodded, her needles clicking once before she tucked them away. "Quickly now. But watch the shadows. My dear, they're listening." Chapter 5. The Locked Room Riddle. The walls of the guest room seemed to pulse, a slow, rhythmic constriction that made Marianne Sheridan's chest tighten with dread. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of iron and decay, and the entities, chant, their names woven into a guttural rhythm, still echoed in her ears, though the sound had faded into an eerie silence. The door to the room, which had slammed shut behind them, was locked, its keyhole emitting a faint, unnatural glow. The group stood huddled in the center, their faces pale in the flickering light of a single candle that trembled in Clara Hemming's, shaking hands. Hercule Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the room, his mustache twitching as he took in the claw marks gouged into the oak paneling, the shattered mirror reflecting nothing but darkness, and the diary they'd found, its pages open, to a description of a ritual that had failed centuries ago. "This is no ordinary prison," he said, his voice steady despite the oppressive atmosphere. "A locked room, but one designed to hold us for a purpose. We must solve its riddle, or I fear we will not leave it." Miss Jane Marple, her knitting bag still clutched tightly, stepped toward the door, her gaze fixed on the glowing keyhole. "In my experience, Mr. Poirot, a locked room is never just about the lock. It's about what's meant to stay inside, or what's meant to get out. This room feels alive." Marianne's heart pounded, her journalist's instincts urging her to find answers even as fear clawed at her resolve. The other guests, Dr. Evelyn Crane, Thomas Blackwood, Clara Hemming, Captain James Ridley, and Lydia Voss, were visibly shaken. Crane's notebook was open, her pen scribbling furiously, as if to anchor herself to reason. Blackwood's eyes were wide, fixed on the shadows that seemed to writhe in the corners. Hemming's lips moved in a silent prayer, her handkerchief shredded in her hands. Ridley gripped his knife, his knuckles white, while Voss muttered in that strange language, her fingers tracing symbols on the diary's cover. Lord Ashford, standing slightly apart, looked paler than before, his composure fraying. "This room," he said, his voice low, "is one of the manor's oldest. It was sealed after the last ritual failed. I didn't expect it to trap us." "Didn't expect?" Marianne snapped, her fear giving way to anger. "You brought us here, Ashford. You knew about the entity, the rituals, the danger. What else are you hiding?" Ashford's eyes flicked to the door, avoiding her gaze. "I told you, Miss Sheridan, I summoned you to stop it. But the manor, it has its own will. It chooses its moments." A low groan reverberated through the floor, like the shifting of ancient bones. The candle flickered, casting jagged shadows that seemed to form faces, distorted, eyeless, mouths stretched in silent screams. Marianne's breath caught as she noticed the diary's pages flutter, though no breeze stirred the air. The words on the open page seemed to shift, forming a single chilling sentence. "The key is within." Poirot's cane tapped the floor sharply. "The key is within," he repeated, his voice cutting through the tension. "A clue, perhaps, or a taunt? We must examine this room with method and precision. Every detail matters." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes scanning the walls. "I've seen rooms like this in old houses, but never one so deliberate. Those claw marks, they're not random. They form a pattern, like the stitches in a quilt. And that mirror..." She paused, her gaze narrowing. "It's not reflecting us properly." Marianne turned to the shattered mirror, Her reflection fractured and distorted. For a moment she saw not her own face but another, pale, eyeless, with a mouth that gaped too wide. She stumbled back, her pulse racing. "Did anyone else see that?" Blackwood's voice was a whisper. "It's the devourer. It's watching us through the glass." "Enough of this nonsense," Ridley growled, striding to the door and slamming his shoulder against it. The wood didn't budge, but a low laugh, cold and inhuman, echoed from the other side, sending a shiver down Marianne's spine. Voss's muttering grew louder, her words now audible. "The Raven's hour, the lock demands a sacrifice." She clutched the diary, her eyes wild. "It's in the text. The room won't open until it's fed." "Fed?" Crane's voice was sharp, her pen pausing. "You mean blood? A life?" Ashford's face darkened. "The entity thrives on fear, on division. It wants us to turn on each other." Marianne's mind raced, her journalist's training kicking in. "Then we don't give it what it wants. We work together. We find the key." But the shadows were closing in, the air growing colder, and the glow from the keyhole pulsed like a heartbeat, drawing them deeper into the manor's trap. Chapter 6. Secrets of the Village Green. The corridor of mirrors stretched before Marianne Sheridan, each reflective surface a window into terror. Her own face stared back, but it was wrong. Eyes hollow, mouth twisted into a scream she hadn't uttered. The others, Hercule Poirot, Miss Jane Marple, and the remaining guests, stood frozen, their reflections showing not themselves, but visions of their fears. Poirot bound in chains, Marple drowning in shadows, Dr. Crane's hands dripping blood, Blackwood's face dissolving into mist, Hemming weeping over a grave, Ridley's chest pierced by his own knife, Voss consumed by writhing symbols, and Ashford. His reflection was empty, a void where a man should have been. The door to the locked room had swung inward, but this corridor offered no escape, only a descent into the manor's malevolent heart. Marianne's breath hitched, her journalist's instincts battling the urge to run. "We can't stay here," she whispered, her voice echoing strangely as if the mirrors spoke back. "These reflections, they're not real. They're what it wants us to see." Hercule Poirot's cane tapped the stone floor, a steady rhythm against the oppressive silence. "The little gray cells, they revolt against this trickery," he said, his voice calm but strained. "This corridor is a test, but of what? Courage? Truth? We must find the way forward." Miss Jane Marple adjusted her shawl, her eyes scanning the mirrors with a quiet intensity. "In my village, mirrors were said to hold memories. Sometimes, truths too painful to face. But these, they're not memories. They're warnings. Or perhaps lures." Lord Ashford, his face pale, stepped forward, his shadow absent despite the candlelight. "The manor wants us divided," he said, his voice low. "It feeds on fear, on doubt. We must leave this place. Now." "And go where?" Captain Ridley snapped, his knife gleaming in his hand. "Every room in this cursed house is a trap." Lydia Voss, clutching the diary from the locked room, muttered, "The Village Green. The text speaks of it. A place of binding, where the ritual began." Her eyes were feverish, her fingers tracing the air as if rewriting the symbols she'd seen. Dr. Crane's notebook trembled in her hands. "The Green? I've read of it. A site of old sacrifices, tied to the manor's history. If the entity was bound there, it might hold answers." Marianne's mind raced. The Village Green, just beyond the manor's gates, was a place from her childhood stories, a seemingly innocent field where villagers gathered, but whispered to be cursed, a place where shadows lingered too long. "If the Green holds answers, we need to go," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "But we stay together. No more traps." The corridor hummed, a low vibration that made the mirrors quiver. The reflections shifted, showing not fears, but moments. Clara Hemming's ancestor sealing a pact with blood, Blackwood's seance summoning a darkness he couldn't banish, Ashford standing alone in the manor's hall, whispering to something unseen. Marianne's reflection showed her holding the blood-stained locket from Chapter 1, its chain tightening around her neck. Poirot's voice cut through the rising panic. Enough! We move, mes amis, to the village green, but we must be vigilant. The entity plays with our minds. The corridor ended abruptly at a rusted iron door, its surface etched with the raven and thorn crest. It opened with a groan, revealing the manor's fog-choked grounds. The group stepped out, the cold biting their skin, the fog so thick it seemed to breathe. The village green lay beyond the gates, a faint glow in the distance, like a beacon, or a trap. As they walked, the manor loomed behind them, its spires piercing the mist like claws. Marianne felt eyes on her, not from the group but from the shadows that clung to the trees. Miss Marple's step was steady, but her eyes darted to the ground, noting footprints that appeared and vanished in the mud. Poirot's cane sank into the earth as if the ground resisted his presence. The village green was a stark contrast to the manor's oppressive gloom, a wide open field ringed by ancient oaks, their branches twisted like skeletal hands. A stone circle stood at its center, weathered and moss-covered, its slabs inscribed with symbols that matched those in Voss's translations. The air here was different, heavy with an electric hum, as if the ground itself pulsed with life. "This is it," Voss whispered, her voice trembling, "the place where the entity was bound, and where it will rise." A scream tore through the night, not from the group but from the village beyond, a sound of pure terror, cut short. The fog parted briefly, revealing a figure in the distance, cloaked and motionless, its face hidden. Then it was gone, swallowed by the mist. Marianne's heart pounded. "We're not alone out here." Miss Marple's voice was soft but firm. "No, my dear, and I suspect the village green has secrets it's eager to share." Chapter 7. Poirot's Methodical Musings. The spectral figure's accusation hung in the air like a noose, its words, spoken in a chorus of the group's own voices, still echoing across the village green. "One of you is the betrayer." The stone circle's glow had faded, but the fog clung to the ground, swirling around the ancient oaks as if alive, whispering secrets Marianne Sheridan could almost understand. Her heart pounded, her journalist's instincts urging her to dissect the entity's claim, but fear rooted her to the spot. The group stood within the circle, their faces pale in the dim moonlight, each eyeing the others with a mix of suspicion and dread. Hercule Poirot's cane tapped the ground, a deliberate rhythm that cut through the oppressive silence. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the group. Lord Ashford, Dr. Evelyn Crane, Thomas Blackwood, Clara Hemming, Captain James Ridley, Lydia Voss, Miss Marple, and Marianne herself. "This entity," he said, his voice calm but commanding, "it plays a game of the mind, It sows discord, but Hercule Poirot will not be swayed by shadows. We must return to the manor, mes amis, and unravel this riddle with method and order." Miss Jane Marple, her knitting bag clutched tightly, nodded slowly. "Mr. Poirot is right, my dear," she said to Marianne, her voice soft but firm. "The village green has shown us its truth, but the manor holds the heart of this mystery, and I suspect the answers lie in what we've overlooked." Marianne's hands trembled as she glanced at the stone slab beneath her feet, its engraved names, eerily similar to her own, still vivid in her mind. "Overlooked?" she asked. "That figure accused one of us of betrayal. How do we know who to trust?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Trust, Mademoiselle Sheridan, is not the question. Truth is. The little gray cells, they demand facts, not feelings. The entity's words are a distraction, but they reveal a pattern. We must examine the clues, the diary, the locket, the tea, the mirrors, and now this green. They are pieces of a puzzle, and I, Hercule Poirot, will assemble them." The fog thickened, the air growing colder, and a low hum vibrated through the ground as if the stone circle responded to Poirot's resolve. Lord Ashford's face was ashen, his eyes darting to the oaks where the shadows seemed to pulse. "We can't stay here," he said, his voice tight. "The Raven's hour is near. If we don't act, it will take us all." "Take us?" Ridley snarled, his knife glinting as he stepped forward. "I'm done with riddles, Ashford. You've been leading us into traps since we arrived. If anyone's the betrayer, it's you. Dr. Crane's notebook snapped shut, her voice sharp. Enough. Captain, the entity wants us at each other's throats. My research suggests the betrayer is a role, not a person, a figure chosen by the ritual to serve the entity. Voss, still clutching the diary, whispered, "The text agrees. The betrayer is marked by the raven, bound by blood. One of us carries its sign." Marianne's hand went to her pocket, where the blood-stained locket from Chapter 1 rested, its weight heavier than it should be. She hadn't told the others about it, not yet, but the memory of her reflection strangling her with its chain made her skin crawl. Was she marked? Miss Marple's eyes flicked to Marianne as if sensing her unease. "Let's not be hasty," she said, her tone deceptively mild. "In my village, accusations often reveal more about the accuser than the accused. Mr. Poirot, what do your little gray cells suggest?" Poirot's gaze lingered on each guest, his expression unreadable. The manor and the green are linked, a stage for this entity's drama. The diary speaks of a failed ritual, the locket of a personal loss, the tea of a poisoned offering, the mirrors of hidden truths, and now the green of a betrayal long ago. I propose we return to the manor's library. There we will find records, documents, perhaps, that will clarify this betrayer and the raven's hour. A scream echoed from the village, closer now, followed by the sound of breaking glass. The fog parted briefly, revealing a cloaked figure at the edge of the green, its face a void, its form dissolving into mist before Marianne could blink. Blackwood gasped, clutching his head, his eyes wild. "It's here," he whispered. "It's always been here." The group moved quickly, retracing their steps through the fog to the manor's gates, the oak's whispers following them like a chorus of the damned. Marianne felt the locket pulse in her pocket as if it had a heartbeat of its own. Chapter 8. Miss Marple's quiet observations. The air in the manor's library was thick with the scent of old leather and something sharper, like blood or rust, as the walls sealed shut with a groan that seemed to come from the earth itself. Marianne Sheridan's heart pounded, her eyes darting to the raven feathers that drifted to the floor, each one dissolving into wisps of shadow. The entity's demand, the betrayer must step forward, hung in the silence, its voice a chorus of whispers that clawed at her mind. The group stood trapped, their faces pale in the flickering light of a single candelabrum, its flames trembling as if afraid to burn. Hercule Poirot's cane tapped the floor, a steady rhythm against the chaos, but even his sharp eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "This is a moment of truth, mes amis," he said, his voice measured. "The entity seeks to divide us, but Hercule Poirot will not be swayed by fear. We must find the logic in this madness." Miss Jane Marple, standing quietly by a towering bookshelf, adjusted her shawl, her eyes glinting with a calm that belied the horror around them. "Logic is all well and good, Mr. Poirot," she said softly. "But in my village, it's the small things, the ones no one notices, that reveal the truth. A misplaced glance, a hesitant word, a shadow that falls where it shouldn't. This manor is full of such things." Marianne's hand tightened around the blood-stained locket in her pocket, its pulse stronger now, as if it sensed the entity's presence. "What are you saying, Miss Marple?" she asked, her voice unsteady. "That one of us is hiding something?" Marple's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "My dear, in a place like this, everyone hides something. The trick is knowing what matters." Lord Ashford, his face drawn, stepped forward, his shadow flickering unnaturally on the wall. "Enough games," he said, his voice tight. "The raven's hour is upon us. If we don't act, the entity will take us all." "Doctor," Evelyn Crane clutched her notebook, her knuckles white. "My research is clear. The betrayer is part of the ritual. One of us was chosen, marked by the manor. We need to find out who." Thomas Blackwood's eyes were wild, his voice a rasp. "I've seen it, in my visions. The betrayer's shadow is wrong, twisted. It's here, among us." Captain Ridley's knife gleamed as he pointed it at Ashford. You've been leading us into traps since we arrived. If anyone's marked, it's you." Lydia Voss, clutching the diary, whispered, "The text speaks of a mark, a raven's brand. It's hidden, but it burns." Her fingers traced the air, her eyes distant as if seeing something the others couldn't. Clara Hemming's handkerchief was in tatters, her voice trembling. "My family. We were part of the first ritual. The betrayer was one of us then. I fear it's me now." Marianne's skin crawled. The locket in her pocket felt like a brand itself, its weight pulling at her thoughts. She wanted to speak, to confess its existence, but fear held her tongue. What if she was the betrayer? Miss Marple's eyes flicked to Marianne, then to the others, her gaze lingering on small details. A smudge of ink on Crane's sleeve, a tremor in Blackwood's hands, a bead of sweat on Ridley's brow. "In St. Mary Mead," she said, her voice cutting through the tension, "I once solved a murder because of a dropped teacup. It wasn't the cup itself, you see, but what it revealed about the person who dropped it. This library, this manor, it's dropping teacups everywhere." The candelabrum flickered and the shadows on the walls twisted, forming shapes that seemed to mimic the group's movements. A low hum vibrated through the floor, and the bookshelves groaned, their tomes shifting as if pushed by unseen hands. Marianne's gaze darted to a shelf where a single book protruded, its spine marked with the raven and thorn crest. She stepped toward it, her hand trembling, but Miss Marple's voice stopped her. "Careful, my dear," Marple said. "In a place like this, even a book can bite." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Mademoiselle Marple is correct, but we must investigate. The little gray cells suggest this library holds the key to the betrayer's identity. Let us proceed with caution." As Marianne reached for the book, a scream echoed from beyond the sealed walls. Not human, but a wail that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality. The candelabrum went out, plunging the room into darkness, and the entity's voice returned, whispering, "The betrayer knows." Chapter 9. Marianne's Hidden Insight. The mirror in the hidden chamber reflected nothing but darkness for one of them, a void where a face should have been, and Marianne Sheridan's blood ran cold as she realized the group's eyes were turning toward her. The library's walls, now cracked open to reveal this secret room, pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, as if the manor itself breathed. Raven feathers littered the floor, each one dissolving into shadow upon touch, and the air was thick with the scent of old blood and wax. The locket in Marianne's pocket burned against her skin, its pulse sinking with her racing heart, as if it knew the entity's accusation. The betrayer knows. Marianne's journalist's instincts screamed for her to act, to uncover the truth, before suspicion consumed them all, but fear held her in its grip. The group, Hercule Poirot, Miss Jane Marple, Lord Ashford, Dr. Evelyn Crane, Thomas Blackwood, Clara Hemming, Captain James Ridley, and Lydia Voss, stood in a tense circle, their faces lit by a single flickering torch that cast jagged shadows on the stone walls. The void in the mirror had pointed to no one specifically, yet Marianne felt the weight of their gazes, as if the locket marked her as the betrayer. Hercule Poirot's cane tapped the floor, a steady counterpoint to the manor's pulse. "This mirror," he said, his voice calm but piercing, "it is a tool of the entity, oui? It shows us what it wishes us to see: fear, doubt, betrayal. But Hercule Poirot relies on the little gray cells, not illusions. Mademoiselle Sheridan, you have been quiet. What do you see?" Marianne's throat tightened. She wanted to confess about the locket, to share the burning weight of it, but the words wouldn't come. "I see a trap," she managed, her voice trembling. "The entity wants us to turn on each other. We need to focus on the clues, not the mirror." Miss Marple's eyes, sharp behind her wire-rimmed glasses, lingered on Marianne as if reading her thoughts. "My dear," she said softly, "in my village, the truth often hides in what we're afraid to say. You've found something, haven't you? Something you're keeping to yourself." Marianne's hand twitched toward her pocket, but she stopped herself. The locket felt alive, its heat spreading through her like a warning. "I'm just trying to understand," she said, deflecting. The diary, the green, the tea, the mirrors, they're all connected. We need to figure out how. Lord Ashford's face was pale, his eyes darting to the mirror. The Raven's hour is close, he said, his voice strained. The entity is testing us, probing our weaknesses. If we don't find the betrayer, it will choose for us. Dr. Crane's notebook trembled in her hands. My research suggests the betrayer is marked by a physical sign, a brand, a relic. We should search each other. Search? Ridley growled, his knife gleaming as he stepped forward. I'm not letting anyone near me. This is a setup, and I'm betting Ashford's behind it. Voss's voice was a whisper, her fingers tracing the diary's cover. The text speaks of a key, a relic that binds the betrayer to the entity. It's here, among us. Clara Hemming's hand shook, her torn handkerchief falling to the floor. My family, we carried a curse. If I'm the betrayer, I didn't choose it. Blackwood's eyes were wild, his voice hoarse. I've seen the entity's face in my visions. It knows the betrayer. It's laughing at us. The torch flickered, and the shadows on the walls twisted, forming shapes that seemed to mimic the group's movements. Claws, eyes, gaping mouths. A low hum vibrated through the chamber, and the mirror's surface rippled, showing fleeting glimpses of the village. Green, the stone circle, and a figure with no face, its cloak billowing in an unseen wind. Marianne's skin crawled as the locket burned hotter, urging her to act. I found something, she blurted, her voice cutting through the tension. She pulled the locket from her pocket, its blood-stained surface glinting in the torchlight. In the grand hall the first night, it was in a hidden drawer. It feels alive. The group's eyes locked on the locket, and the air grew colder, the hum louder. Miss Marple's gaze softened, but her voice was firm. That's a brave thing to share, my dear. In St. Mary Mead, a locket like that would tell a story, perhaps one you're meant to uncover. Poirot's mustache twitched. A relic, a clue to the betrayer's identity, perhaps. But why you, Mademoiselle Sheridan? Why does it burn for you? Before Marianne could answer, a scream tore through the chamber, not from the group, but from the mirror itself. The glass shattered, and a gust of icy wind swept through, extinguishing the torch and plunging them into darkness. The entity's voice whispered, "The key is yours." Chapter 10. The Final Revelation. The hidden chamber shuddered, its stone walls cracking like brittle bones as the entity's presence surged, a palpable force that pressed against Marianne Sheridan's skin. The locket in her hand burned, its blood-stained surface pulsing in time with her heartbeat, as if it were an extension of her own body. The air was thick with the scent of decay and raven feathers, the shadows writhing like living things, and the entity's whisper, "The key is yours," echoed in her mind, accusing, demanding. The group stood on the brink of collapse, both literal and figurative, as the manor seemed to close in, determined to claim them all. Hercule Poirot's cane struck the floor, a sharp crack that cut through the chaos. "We are at the crux, Mason." "Amos," he said, his voice steady despite the trembling ground. "The Raven's hour is upon us. The locket, the betrayer, the ritual, they converge here. We must act with precision or we are lost." Miss Jane Marple, her shawl pulled tight, stood beside Marianne, her eyes glinting with quiet resolve. "In my village, my dear, the truth often comes at the last moment when all seems hopeless. You hold the key, Miss Sheridan, but not just the locket. It's what you know, what you've always known." Marianne's breath caught, the weight of their words pressing down on her. The letter she'd found in the archive, written by her ancestor, a woman who betrayed the original ritual, burned in her memory. Was she the betrayer marked by blood and history? The locket's heat was unbearable now, and she clutched it tighter, her journalist's instincts urging her to uncover the truth even as fear screamed for her to flee. Lord Ashford's face was ashen, his eyes darting to the collapsing walls. "The entity is breaking free," he said, his voice hoarse. "The locket is the anchor. If we don't use it now, it will consume us." Dr. Evelyn Crane's notebook fell to the floor, her hands shaking. My research, it's clear. The ritual requires a sacrifice. The betrayer must offer themselves or the entity will take us all. Thomas Blackwood's voice was a rasp, his eyes wild with visions. I've seen it. Its true form. It's not just a shadow. It's hunger, endless and ancient. Captain Ridley's knife gleamed as he stepped toward Marianne. If you're the betrayer, girl, hand over the locket. I'll end this myself. Lydia Voss, clutching the diary, whispered, The text says the betrayer's blood seals the ritual. It's you, Marianne. It's always been you. Clara Hemming's tears streamed down her face, her voice breaking. My family started this curse. If it's blood you need, take mine. Marianne's mind raced, the locket's pulse sinking with the manor's groans. She looked to Poirot and Marple, seeking guidance. Poirot's eyes were fixed on her, his expression unreadable, while Marple's gaze was soft but piercing, as if she saw through to Marianne's soul. You're not alone, my dear, Marple said gently. In St. Mary Mead I learned that courage comes from facing what we fear most. What does the locket tell you? Marianne opened her hand, the locket's surface glowing faintly, its raven and thorn crest shimmering. She closed her eyes and a memory surged, not hers but her ancestors. A woman standing in this chamber offering her blood to bind the entity, only to betray the ritual for love, dooming the manor. The locket was her relic, her curse, passed down through generations to Marianne. I know what to do, Marianne said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. The ritual failed because of betrayal. We need to finish it. Together. The chamber shook violently, and the shadows coalesced into a towering figure, a void with raven wings, its eyeless face fixed on Marianne. The entity's voice roared, Give me the betrayer. Poirot's cane struck the ground again. Mademoiselle Sheridan, you have the truth. Use it. The little gray cells trust you. Marple nodded. Trust yourself, my dear. The manor chose you, for a reason. Marianne's heart pounded as she stepped toward the center of the chamber, where a stone altar, etched with the same symbols as the village green, stood waiting. Chapter 11. The Raven's Echo. The dawn broke over Willow Manor, its pale light cutting through the fog like a blade, but Marianne Sheridan felt no relief. The raven's silhouette perched on the manor's iron gates burned into her memory, a solitary watcher, its eyes glinting with an intelligence that wasn't natural. The locket, still heavy in her pocket, no longer pulsed, but its weight was a constant reminder of the ritual's cost. The entity had been sealed, bound to the altar by their fragile unity, yet the manor's silence felt like a held breath, as if the darkness waited for one misstep to reclaim them. Marianne stood with Hercule Poirot and Miss Jane Marple on the gravel drive. The other guests, Dr. Evelyn Crane, Thomas Blackwood, Clara Hemming, Captain James Ridley, and Lydia Voss, huddled. Nearby, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. Lord Ashford's absence hung over them like a specter. His confession and disappearance into the shadows had left more questions than answers. The manor loomed behind them, its spires stark against the sky, and Marianne's skin prickled with the sense that it was watching, waiting. Hercule Poirot adjusted his coat, his mustache twitching as he scanned the gates. The ritual was successful. We, he said, his voice measured but tinged with unease. Yet the little gray cells, they are not at peace. The raven, the locket, the manor, they suggest this is not the end. Miss Marple, her shawl pulled tight, followed his gaze to the raven, which hadn't moved, its head cocked as if listening. In St. Mary Mead, she said softly, a single bird could mean many things. A messenger, a warning, or a remnant of something unfinished. That raven, my dear, is no ordinary creature. Marianne's hand tightened around the locket, its surface cold but heavy with meaning. Ashford said the entity was bound, she said, her journalist's instincts stirring. But he also said he orchestrated this. What if he wasn't working alone? What if the ritual only delayed the raven's hour? A low croak broke the silence, the raven's call echoing across the grounds, sharp and mocking. The fog, though thinning, swirled briefly, forming shapes that vanished when Marianne blinked. Claws, eyes, a cloaked figure. Her heart raced, the memory of the entity's voice. The key is yours, resurfacing like a wound. Dr. Crane, clutching her tattered notebook, stepped forward, her voice sharp. My research warned of echoes, fragments of the entity that linger, after a binding. That raven could be one. We need to leave now before it calls the rest. Blackwood's eyes were haunted, his voice a whisper. I still see it in my visions. It's not gone, it's waiting. Hemming's hands trembled, her voice breaking. My family's curse, it never ends. The raven is a sign. We're still marked. Ridley's knife was in his hand, his eyes narrow. If that bird's trouble, I'll deal with it. I'm done running. Voss, clutching the diary, muttered. The text, it's changing again. New words about an echo, a shadow that follows the key. Her gaze flicked to Marianne, her eyes wild. It's you. The locket. It's not over. Marianne's stomach twisted, the locket's weight pulling at her. She wanted to throw it away, to rid herself of its curse, but her instincts told her it was the key to understanding what came next. We need to go back to the village, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The green, the records, there's more to learn. If the raven's an echo, we need to know what it wants. Poirot nodded, his cane tapping the ground. Mademoiselle, Sheridan speaks wisely. The village holds answers, records perhaps, or witnesses. We must proceed with method. Marple's eyes lingered on the raven. And caution, Mr. Poirot. In my experience, what lingers after a storm is often more dangerous than the storm itself. As the group moved toward the gates, the raven spread its wings and took flight, circling above them before vanishing into the fog. A chill ran through Marianne, and the locket grew warm again, a faint pulse that matched the rhythm of her steps. The village green lay ahead, but the path felt like a descent back into the manor's grasp. Chapter 12. The Last Binding. The raven's shadow loomed over the village green, its form shifting into a grotesque parody of Lord Ashford, its eyes voids that swallowed the moonlight. Marianne Sheridan clutched the locket, its surface scorching her palm, its pulse a frantic echo of her own heartbeat. The fog swirled around the stone circle, forming spectral ravens that screeched in unison, their cries blending with the entity's voice. Now Ashford's, now her ancestors', now her own. Destroy the key, or become it. The air was thick with the scent of blood and earth, and the ground trembled as if the green itself rejected their presence. Hercule Poirot stood firm, his cane planted in the earth, his eyes sharp despite the chaos. This is the final act, mes amis, he said, his voice cutting through the shrieking fog. The raven's echo seeks to unravel the binding, but Hercule Poirot will not allow it. We must complete the ritual, with order and truth. Miss Jane. Marple, her shawl tight around her shoulders, watched the spectral ravens with a calm that belied the horror. In St. Mary Mead, she said softly, the end of a mystery often comes down to a single choice. Miss Sheridan, you hold the locket, but it's your heart that will decide this. Marianne's chest tightened, the locket's heat spreading through her like a fever. The church archive's prophecy rang in her mind. The raven's echo could only be destroyed by shattering the locket, but doing so risked freeing the entity entirely. Her ancestors' betrayal, choosing love over duty, had cursed the manor, and now Marianne stood at the same crossroads. Was she the betrayer, doomed to repeat history, or could she rewrite it? The group, Dr. Evelyn Crane, Thomas Blackwood, Clara Hemming, Captain James Ridley, and Lydia Voss, formed a ragged circle around the stone slab, their faces pale in the eerie glow of the stones. Crane's notebook was clutched to her chest, her voice trembling. The echo is the entity's failsafe. If we destroy the locket, we might unleash the full force of the devourer. Blackwood's eyes were wild, his visions overwhelming. I see it, endless hunger, swallowing the world. The locket is the only thing holding it back. Hemming's tears fell freely, her voice breaking. My family's sin started this. If blood is needed, let it be mine. Ridley's knife gleamed, his voice a growl. "No more talk. Give me the locket, Sheridan. I'll end this." Voss, her hands shaking as she clutched the diary, whispered, "The text. It's clear now. The last binding requires the key's bearer to choose. Freedom or sacrifice." Marianne's gaze darted to Poirot and Marple, seeking their guidance. Poirot's expression was unreadable, but his voice was firm. "Mademoiselle Sheridan, the little gray cells see the truth in you. The locket is a relic, but you are the key. What does your instinct tell you?" Marple's eyes were kind but piercing. "You've carried this burden, my dear, but you're not alone. Trust the truth you've uncovered." The raven's shadow grew, its form twisting into a towering mass of feathers and void, its voice roaring, "Choose, or all will fall." The stones glowed brighter, the fog tightening like a noose, and the locket burned, its crest pulsing with light. Marianne's mind raced, piecing together the clues, the diary's warnings, the tea's poison, the mirror's truths, the green's history, the locket's memories. She saw it now. The entity thrived on division, but the ritual's power lay in unity. "I won't destroy it," Marianne said, her voice steady despite the terror. "We finish the ritual, together." The raven screeched, and the ground split, revealing a chasm beneath the slab, its depths alive with writhing shadows.